Hello, this is Rob and Mike from the McClellan Financial Group of Asante Capital Management, and this is ThinkSmart with TMFG. Mike, how are you today?
Doing well.
So today I thought we would spend a few minutes and talk about some of the problems of getting older. And more specifically, what are some of the problems that financial advisors encounter when they're dealing with clients as they're getting older?
Yeah.
When I say that, what's some of the first things that come to your mind?
Well, it's funny because we're dealing with that. When did you start in business? You started close to 30 years ago now.
I was looking at it. I'm in my 28th year, so almost 30 years.
I'm in my 25th, and when we started off, you're taking off people. We've always specialized in retirement, right? So we were taking on people who were just about to go into retirement, who were 55 to 65. Add 30 years onto those ages, and where are you at now?
We've got a lot of clients in their mid-70s, early 80s, and some in their early 90s.
And the experience of getting them through that over the last 30 years has opened our eyes to a lot of things with dealing with seniors. And it's funny, I've dealt a lot of, I've been on some charitable boards that dealt with seniors. And some stuff they gave me as feedback is seniors become very protective as they get older. And the reason why is when you're young, you have everything in front of you. As you start to get older, things start to get taken away. You know, your ability to go and make all your decisions to travel might start to get limited. Eventually, when you get older, they might start limiting your ability to drive. And then later on, you start getting limited ability to make financial decisions. So sometimes as people get more senior, they become very protective of the last thing usually left is the financial part of it, right? Because that's the one thing no one really wants to touch because it's a very confidential type of thing. And this is the last piece of aging is when you have to finally hand over your finances.
I always find it interesting. They get very protective even when the math is pretty simple. I can be talking to a 90-year-old who knows they've probably only got a couple of years left and they have over $1 million worth of investment assets, plus a house often, and they're nervous. They're nervous that they're going to be running out of money or that this may cost too much if they go on a trip for $5,000 or $10,000. Yep. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. But back to, they have difficulty not only just making decisions, but they have difficulty with change.
Yep.
So what are some of the signs that you've encountered that people are getting older?
So main thing is when you're discussing finances, the dollars, some people that will be very quick with figures. If we're always phenomenal at figuring out things to a dime, we'll start to not be able to put together those financial concepts as quickly. And I mean, sometimes you deal with early stage dementia. The first sign to that is usually people have trouble. They revert back to their childhood. And when you start dealing large dollar figures, they can tell $1 from $2, but they can't tell $100,000 from $1 million. It's all out of their realm of understanding. And they begin to lose concept of big money.
Right.
And I find that's a first sign of stage 1 dementia. And you got to keep an eye out for that. And again, that's when you need, as we say, when you start to get into your early 80s. Because the tricky part with aging is, as you said, no one ever thinks they're old.
No.
I don't think I'm old. I think I'm a kid.
How old are you now?
I'm 50 years old.
I'm 58. Other than looking in the mirror, after I look in the mirror and forget about what I saw, I go out like I'm 40 years old.
So no one wants to get old. So no one wants to accept the fact that they're getting old. So the trick to making good financial decisions is make them when you're still young enough to understand the decisions you're making. So at age 80, you should start to put in place the plans that are going to take care of you when you're 90 and if you're lucky enough to make 100.
You've got to make those decisions. And what else? I think we're lucky in our job, lucky and unlucky, in that because we often see some clients maybe every 4 months or some of them every 6 months, we get to see the changes that they may not even see, or maybe their spouse doesn't even see if they have one. And you and I have often said, wow, that client didn't look great. And then I would say, not only did they not look great, but they were different in the meeting. I couldn't quite pinpoint what was different, but they were more agitated. They weren't comfortable. A client of 25 years is suddenly not as trusting as they might have been. You start to see some strange things. They ask questions that they'd never asked before.
There's definitely a personality switch. Remember, we had a client, and I won't divulge names or anything, but she was a great client for many years and was very in touch with all her portfolio, every detail, every tax. She brought in spreadsheets with everything listed. And one time, she all of a sudden wasn't there. And I remember talking to her son and saying, I met with your mom, something's not right. And he brought in the doctor, and she had a brain tumor. And it was just that, and she passed away, I think, within a year of that. But it was funny, sitting in the financial, they don't see it as quickly because they see a slow deterioration, which is very hard to pick up.
Right.
If we see someone 4 months later and all of a sudden they don't understand the concept that they would have been very easily understood the last meeting, you can tell there's some deterioration in there.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the steps that you can take in advance to make life simpler for not only yourself, but for anyone who may be assisting you later on? What are some of the things that someone who's getting older and starts to feel that they're I think you probably know you're losing a little bit. Yep. You're forgetting a little more. You're slower to think things through. You can't solve problems like the way you used to.
The biggest thing we've done here is we have something we always call the family meeting. And I've done probably 30 of them so far. You've done a bunch too. And what it is you take a time to come in the office with the entire immediate family. And usually it's not spouses. Usually it's just the parents and their children. And from that meeting, you go through and there's three major things you want to go through in these meetings. Number one is to make sure the parents are financially stable.
Yep.
Right. So first of all, let's go and talk about what the finances look like. A lot of times parents don't divulge to their kids. There's a lot of different fears. Sometimes they fear their kids aren't going to work hard if they know there's this much money they're going to be left. They might do things that are inappropriate. A lot of reasons why people don't divulge financial information. But when you hit 80, it's time to open that up, right? So
you have the family meeting. You should probably go through the will, what it looks like.
That's
if there's any issues, you can resolve some of those issues.
Yep. Stage 2 is absolutely go through the will, power of attorney, let people know what the parents' wishes are. This is even going to talking about things of, do I want to be cremated? Do I want to be buried? Things like that. You don't want to discuss this stuff at your Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner table.
Absolutely not.
This is stuff that should be separated, done in an office in a controlled environment.
The other issue with families is rarely are you all together as a family unit. You've typically got grandchildren or, brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws and all that there. Like, I can't remember the last time my family unit was just the five of us. Yeah. We now have significant others in our family, and that's not going to change.
Sometimes it's hard to have a real discussion with spouses in the room.
Absolutely.
And it's an important thing to make sure everyone can be free at the time to say whatever they feel.
What are some of the other things that, like, simple things that a client could do?
Few things. I mean, number one, obviously we usually check beneficiaries, things like that, make sure everything is set up the right way.
I always look at, things like wills. Make sure your will is truly what your wishes are. We use something called a will schematic, which outlines basically how the money flows on a one-page summary. Wills are complex often to read, so you want to be able to draw a picture of what the will looks like, as opposed to a written, will, which is written by lawyers. You want to make sure you've got powers of attorney and backup powers of attorney for both for wealth and health.
Powers of attorney are interesting too because most people don't know how their power of attorney works. Power of attorney sometimes have triggered events. There's some powers of attorney, if they're in the hands of your kids can use them. Other powers of attorney say you have to be claimed mentally ill by a doctor. Hard part about that is you've ever been through this situation, doctors don't want to sign any forms. They don't want the liability. So a lot of these powers of attorney that people have thought they've done are really pretty useless.
The other idea too is, if you haven't got that, you could often give one of your children a trading authority. And maybe that and the trading authority is that, the kids have to approve some of the things that are going on, right?
We were talking
tricky, but...
We were talking about this earlier. Trading authority is a much better solution in many cases than joint accounts. Joint accounts can cause a lot of problems. There's a lot of people go for a simple solution. Let me just make my accounts joint with my kids. They don't know what long-term bad effects that can have. Using a power of attorney, you can have all the advantage of having a joint account by having a power of attorney or trading authorization on that account and make sure that you don't have all the liability that comes with the joint account.
Absolutely. I see a lot of families try and move everything into joint accounts, try and move the house into, the kid's name and do all these things, all to avoid the probate fee. The probate fee is 1.5%. Yes, if you can avoid it, great. But you make often bigger mistakes trying to avoid the 1.5%, and you put yourself and your family's money at risk by doing that. It's crazy, some of the things that you see.
Another thing is once you start to age, I did this with my parents after my mom passed away, you got to simplify their life. My parents had 6 bank accounts. And the problem is with older people, there used to be a difference between savings accounts, checking accounts. You used to get 6% on your savings account. You get nothing on your checking account. So you used to have all different accounts for different purposes. Right now, banks pay basically nothing on any type of account. So you're better off just having one account. There's not much of a reason for someone over 80 years old to have more than one bank account.
Absolutely. I think of a recent situation with a client, married couple. The husband we knew was going to pass away within 6 months. And so we went through the process of basically closing down most of the bank accounts. We left her with one savings account, one checking account, and one credit card, which is really all she needed. Yep. And then she had all the investment accounts with us. Simplify as much as possible. And it's harder to do when you get older. That's the hard part. It's harder to make the decision of, well, I think you should close down your Visa account that's over at TD Bank because you do all your banking with Scotia. Well, I've had that account and I've had it for 20 years. No, let's just close it down. Simplify things.
Simplify, absolutely. And another thing is liquidity. You want liquidity. And I mean, that's something where property is a great investment over time. But once you start to get in your 80s, if no one wants that piece of property, it becomes a nightmare for an estate to deal with. That's the biggest problem with an estate when you run into them is when they have property to sell. Very difficult to do.
I often think you're better in your, past 85 to be a renter than an owner. Yep. There's different situations, but more and more, I think people should try and divest of some of those assets as they get, into their mid-80s. I think that's a great discussion for today. This is Rob and Mike with ThinkSmart with TMFG from the McClellan Financial Group of Asante Capital Management.
You have been listening to the McClellan Financial Group of Asante Capital Management Limited. Asante Capital Management Limited is a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund, an investment industry regulatory organization of Canada. Insurance products and services are provided through Asante Estate and Insurance Services Incorporated. This material is provided for general information and is subject to change without notice. Every effort has been made to compile this material from reliable sources, however, no warranty can be made as to its accuracy or completeness. Before acting on any of the above, please make sure to see a professional advisor for individual financial advice based on your personal circumstances.